Just a little bit, my partner and I have a 3.5-year-old daughter, and Jessica was our gestational surrogate, or gestational surrogate. I don't know how we're supposed to call her, so we just call her Jessica. We started the process. My daughter was born in 2009. I can remember the dates, and this is actually going to be an overarching theme, probably of what I say, which is it's about becoming a parent. There's a lot of stuff that happens between your decision to become a parent and becoming a parent. Most of that gets blurred out, and luckily almost all of the bad stuff gets blurred out because you become a parent. And so people actually who have been part of the journey for us keep reminding me of the bad stuff. Like, oh right, I forgot. But it's kind of a wonderful thing to just be a parent, and that's kind of where I wanted to start, and where I always wake up each morning, whether I want to or not, at 6 a.m. I was asked to talk a little bit about sort of our process when working with an agency. I started coming to the monthly support group, and there was a woman who presented here who was a psychologist who worked with a clinic in New Jersey. It was the first time that I connected with someone, and I was just like, I get what she's saying, that's sort of how we think about this process, I want to talk with her more. And so we sort of non-traditionally went to a psychologist at the clinic first and said, I met you, I like the way you talk, can you help us through this process or help us think about it? And at the same time, we were interviewing agencies, and we met with a couple of agencies. But it happened that the clinic that the psychologist was connected to, which was RMA New Jersey, really worked very closely with Melissa Brisman and reproductive possibilities. At the time, they were the law offices of Melissa Brisman, so you'll forgive me if I don't know all the words. And it happened that that was really the agency that when we met with also clicked and connected. And so you'll see that there's a theme of you kind of find the one that works for you. There's no right or wrong about this whole process, and that's another thing. We have tons of friends who have gone with other agencies or done it different ways, or friends who go through adoption. It's really about what works for you. And I think about us when we were looking at agencies. I think there were about 3 different. They broke down into 3 different ways of going about it, and one was the sign on the dotted line, we'll take care of everything agency. And then there was the, you're going to do it all yourself, which wasn't really an agency, but it was like, I'm going to piece this together, I'm going to learn this, I'm going to learn that. And I sort of made that akin to, the difference between people who like to buy land and build a house, or people who like to move into a house that's fully furnished in their style. We were smack dab in between those 2 things, and we found an agency that we felt like was smack dab in between those 2 things. Again, there's no value judgment there. It's who you are. Some people like to build houses, and some people like to move into perfectly decorated houses. Like, there's nothing wrong with either of those. But I encourage that process to just be honest with yourselves about what you're looking for, what's going to work along that way. We knew from the outset that we wanted a known egg donor. We had someone in mind. It turned out who had offered, which was a friend. It turned out that our clinic decided that she was actually too old. Know that when you involve people in this process, you're going to put them in interesting positions, and you're going to put yourself in interesting positions. So having to tell this wonderful friend of ours who's offered to do this that you're actually too old is kind of an interesting place to be. And this is another theme that goes throughout our experience. But in the interim, what was kind of wonderful and surprising about that was in looking at what our clinic would say, oh, well, this would be a perfect egg donor, it pointed to actually a close relative. And so we wound up asking and wonderfully having a close relative of ours accept and become our egg donor. So we knew pretty early on that we were not going to be using an egg donor service or an agency for egg donor. But we were going to be looking for a carrier or a surrogate. And so that's really what we started and where we went from there. We knew because our egg donor was not living in the US, we knew that we were probably going to do a frozen, that we would do a donation and then freeze all of our embryos and then do a transfer later, that the timing was just not going to work. So we looked into all of that, made sure that that was going to work, felt pretty comfortable about that. In terms of that, but in the process, we discovered that our perfect egg donor had fertility issues. So again, now we're telling a close relative who had not been a mom and who had not been thinking about becoming a mom yet, that actually she should pretty much hurry up and do that if she wants to, because there's some fertility issues that we've uncovered. As a little aside, she became a mom without really trying on her own a year and a half after our daughter was born, so we're thrilled that that was, you know, one of those things that you don't really know what's going to happen. And so our daughter has, it's actually one of our sisters, so our daughter has a cousin who's a year and a half younger. We, through the agency and Melissa's office, we were matched with, or we would be sent profiles of surrogates, and there was one that we matched with pretty quickly, and you do background check, and on the background check, her license wasn't up to date, and we asked her to correct that, and we never heard from her again. This is the best thing that can happen to you, because you want to hear about that at that point. And we felt like, okay, that was, you know, a couple weeks in the process, chalk it up. We then matched with an incredibly wonderful woman, and went through the process, screening, everything was working. We met her husband, we went through her getting screened at the clinic, and when it came time to cycle, the clinic didn't really think that her body was responding in the way that would be conducive to pregnancy. And another hard conversation had to happen, because we had to tell the woman who, it was about a 6-month period, we had been getting to know and really love for the incredible gift that she was about to give us, that we're now getting a recommendation to move on. And that was probably, I think, the hardest part of our job. It was hard emotionally. It was also hard in terms of a stumbling block. And at this point, it was about now a full year since we had started. And I'm the older member of our couple, and that was an issue for me. And I was feeling that pressure, and I got very anxious, and I started just surfing the web. So I've always been coming to the monthly meetings here, but now I'm like on different websites, and I'm on surromomsonline.com, I think it was, or whatever, and really sort of looking to sort of both vent and connect. And Jessica and I connected online. The strange thing about it was we connected the day that she had sent in her application to Melissa Brisman's office to become a surrogate. And so once we started this, what we really call courtship and dating online of, is this the right match? What are we thinking about each other? Does this work? I quickly said, look, we're really comfortable working with this agency. Are you? And she said, oh, I've just sent in my stuff to this agency. And so we sort of transferred that process over, worked with the agency. I'm supposed to do a couple more things, and I'm running out of time, so we'll get to them, but a couple of important things. There's a really, I work with student advising, and I always tell my students, know before you need. This process is about developing relationships, whether it be with a surrogate, or a doctor, or a hospital administrator. The best advice I got was to go to the hospital and visit and do the pregnancy visit with Jessica at the hospital. We actually met in that visit, and I don't know if she'll talk about it, we met the stumbling block. And it was fine because it was in a really relaxed environment that we were able to sort of go, oh, okay, this wasn't a bad person, it was just a bureaucratic administrator. This is what we're going to have to deal with, this is who we're going to have to, you know, these are the questions we have to answer, and we answered all of those before we gave birth, and that really helped. In terms of that, yeah, so, yeah, more questions.
Thank you. Thank you.